In fact, I'm coming to you from the historical Goodman House, which is my home from 1879. So there's a fun connection between where I'm coming from and this is my digital Zoom studio. So it's this beautiful blend of being in the historical house and still being innovative, cutting edge, and modern at the same time. So if you would start the slides. There we go. So that's the historical house built in 1879 as a wedding gift for the son. The Goodmans were bankers in town, and this was a wedding gift built for their son. And it's been a really wonderful to base our home and art and clarity, and if given a chance, and a number of things that I am also involved in. So it's a community house and a wonderful place to be. So the next image, I believe, is right, there we go. This is the first library for the first formal library for the town of Napa that was built by the Goodman family. And this is where the Historical Society lives on First Street. Thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. And the Historical Society has put together an informative display of the history of photography and development of the camera since the 1830s. So I want to share some personal stories of being a third-generation photographer. My family has spanned the multiple progressions of the camera through 3 generations. So I'm going to give you just a little taste of what's possible. And so I'm going to share, and please bear with us as we flow through this technology of a back and forth, a bit of ping and pong. So here we go. So we're going to see a few minutes of this. So my father was my mentor, and he died in December of COVID, actually. And so this is about the power of photography and how personal it can be, and sharing the story, and how important it is that we have these photographs. So I'm going to stop it there, just because it's a very fun, personal thing, and the power of photography, the fact that I can share with you their wedding pictures, the fact that mom and dad being Sunny and Cher at a Halloween costume party. I mean, when we look back in perspective, that these pictures that we're shooting with the iPhone and that these just capture, like, we think they're important now, but holy moly, they become even more important. Absolutely. And so also what's interesting, and we're going to talk a little bit about, is, yeah, that's great, is about how to deliver the picture. So that was a wonderful image blend, we call it fusion, of bringing together still images, music, and text that is so powerful. It is an amazing thing to be a photographer at this day and age. And if anybody ever wondered about whether or not it was art, and I know that that was an early conversation, it's like, Yes, no question that it absolutely is art and can be taken to amazing, amazing levels. So, but most importantly, I want to give you insight into seeing things differently, and whether you have a camera in hand or not, seeing through the eyes of the artist adds vitality to your life rather than seeing the world as same old. Notice what's different. So life is precious, it's fleeting, it's ever changing. One thing that my father taught me was to never expect to come back to take a photo that you experience in the moment. It will never be the same. So the next slide. So this is Dad with camera in hand. He was an artist and also a sculptor, as well as making gates in my house and a building contractor. So a very, very creative man. Next slide. So I show you this in terms of the Big Bang and time, and the fact that we are actually on a planet that is turning and moving at 18.3 miles per second. Everything is ever changing, and it's fascinating to notice the subtleties. As we look around, sometimes it's a big panoramic that catches our eye, and sometimes it's a small fragment of nature. Next slide. So this is a photograph by Rodchenko done in the 20s, actually. So he, while was really revolutionary in his photography. He was a Russian photographer at the time of Stalin, actually. But the idea of looking up, so it's not just eye level, but I really want to encourage you to get down low and shoot up high, and really, you can take your first shot of the way you'd normally do it, but then I challenge you to take a look and see what else is happening, how else it can be different, to expand that sense of perspective. The next slide. So photography is the science of light. A box, a lens to capture the light that imprints on photosensitive planes, whether it be glass, film, or digital sensor. Next photo. So this is Edison, actually, with these the cameras. It's the first photographers had to be alchemists, preparing their glass plates and mixing the chemistry to develop the negative, and then later prepare photosensitive paper and develop that. Next picture. So why do we love photography so much? So I actually invite you to put it into the chat in terms of what you like taking pictures of. Some people it's landscape, sometimes it's people, sometimes it's pet, but everybody has a different angle of why they like to take pictures. So we want to have this be a little bit interactive here since we can. And so I invite you to put that into the chat if you'd like. It's a window into another time. Like what I showed you before, what an amazing gift it is. It allows us to hold on to fleeting moments in time. Actually, that's why the native traditional folks don't want to be captured by a stranger, because they don't want to be held in time by somebody that they don't know. It's the ability to share everything from present precious moments. Next slide. So this is an example of the older camera with individual sheet film that was, you could only take one picture at a time. Next photo. The idea when we talk about the science of light and the subtleties and being able to master that and to think about things differently. Next photo. I love sharing this picture. So this is when Forrest, our son, was first born. We happen to be Jewish, and this was his first Passover. And there's a tradition that the youngest child says these 4 questions. So we thought that we would add a 5th question to the ceremony, and that was "got milk." So it's so precious. And as we mentioned, that life is fleeting and you just never ever know what's going to happen next. And it's so special to be able to have these pictures to have for ourselves and to be able to share them, to share with Forrest when he got older. And of course, he, I'm sure, didn't remember this moment. So it's really so very special. So what's so interesting about photography, it both tells the truth, but also can be manipulated into an instrument of propaganda. And now the sharing is worldwide and instantaneous, and with smartphones, The era of Dick Tracy has arrived, from a comic book fantasy to reality, with a phone, a camera, a computer, or more on your wrist, in your pocket, or worn as glasses. Next photo. So we're going to talk also about framing devices, and about also when you're taking pictures, to notice about parallel lines, which is so incredibly important. That's one of the differences between the amateur and a photographer, is to, even with capturing, I love capturing people in doorways. So I've had a series for over 30 years of people in doorways. What's so amazing with the cameras is now that we can view the depths of the ocean and faraway planets, and view inside our bodies without having to cut us open or place a camera throughout our bodies, and perform surgeries remotely while seeing in real time interior spaces. Next photo. So talk about interior spaces, right? The sonogram. Next photo. So sometimes there's the big picture, and sometimes it's just a fragment that's so incredibly important. So be looking in the world around you for both the micro, the macro, just noticing the world around you with different eyes. Next photo. So I'm in awe, and I don't take it for granted. It's almost unbelievable, actually, from film that I once held in my hand and could view or project, to the binary code of zeros and ones that turn into consistent images that look like you and look like me and look like the world around us, that also can be refined pixel by pixel. So this is another picture later with my father and I, and so almost every picture that you'll see of me, I actually have a camera in hand there. So he turned over the tradition of taking the family pictures to me, and it's a very special role, even as a young person. Through all of elementary and middle school and high school, I was the historian of the school, taking pictures and capturing the world around me. And so I continue to do that as a service here in our community. Something about the preciousness of life and loving it so much, and really wanting to hold on to time. And this is sort of what allows us to be able to do that. I was born into a family of photography. I'm a third-generation photographer. My grandfather loved capturing his family on both film and still and moving images, and inspired my father to become a professional photographer. And in the early days, he would use a speed graphic, those individual sheet films like I showed you just a moment ago, with those single-use bulbs. I don't know if you remember those, like boom, it would explode, and you had to have enough flash bulbs with you because you were blowing them out every time you took a picture. I'm not sure if folks on the call remember those, but it was definitely a journey through the days of the invention of photography. And when my father shifted to 35mm cameras, he actually loaded his own cassettes with film. We had a dark room in the garage that he built, and I have a funny fondness for the smell of fixative, because it transports me right back into the dark room, working side by side with Dad, watching images emerge onto the white paper in the dark red glow of the safe light in his laboratory. I started shooting by the time that I was 5, and even before that, I was the subject of my father's intrigue, along with my mother and my sister, and we learned from the earliest times to be conscious of the direction of light, the power of portraiture. And we would be sitting in a restaurant by the window, and we would get so excited for us to, he would pose us for a collection of images, side lit by the window light, not directly in the sun, but with the reflective bounced light. So while others think of a cloudy day as a gloomy day, I have come to love the soft, even light, and take delight in the patterns of clouds that make landscapes even more interesting. Next photo. Now, you might ask, why am I showing you a picture of a drill? In fact, it was Dad's drill. And when I was 18, one of the things he shared with me was a toolbox so that I could help prepare the world and have what I need around me. But he would always tell this story that when you buy a drill, you don't buy a drill because you need a drill. You buy a drill because you need a hole. So the camera is very much like that. They're in the same category. So switch to the next. He would also tell us the same story about how he won a photography contest using a Downey Instamatic camera. So I really want to impress upon you that while we are talking about cameras and showing you the history of these things, it's really the eye of the photographer that counts. So what is the story that you are telling? How are you using light and framing and composition? So I'm going to go and show you another fun image, and then we'll come back to this. So we're going to go skip between time, and I'm going to share. Let's see. Here we go. So this was done by Lowell, and I really love it. And it's a personal portrait. So when you talk about direction of light and how to tell one's story poetically. So I wanted to jump into there to just keep reminding us of it's not the camera, it's the eye. It's the how you look at things. And it's nice to have a camera that does the job. And I appreciate that too in the technology and how it's grown. So next slide. There's the Downey, and it was revolutionary. So as we come back to the large format camera, because actually originally this talk was going to be about large format cameras and about the nature of the camera itself. But I love to be able to change the shift into the eye of the photographer. So once upon a time, you'd have a large box with a lens mounted on a tripod, because not only was it too heavy to hold, but you needed to have a 1 to 3 minute exposure. So in order to be focused, the camera can't move and neither can the subject. Folks were asked to hold their breath as best as they could and do not move while the lens was held open with a shutter release button in the hands of the photographer. The photographer didn't know what he captured until it was developed. Next slide. Until the Polaroid was invented in 1948 by Edwin Land, who ran his company until 1981. Next slide. So I don't know how many people have a personal experience about the Polaroid, whether it was the one that popped out of the camera and you'd hold for a minute, or the one that you peeled apart in order to be able to show the what the result was. So you know, and if you had a wedding and it was 100 years ago, maybe you'd have 6 images that were taken, or maybe you'd go to the studio the week before your wedding and have those formal pictures taken in the studio rather than actually on the event itself. So my folks came to visit Lowell and I in 1999 in Napa, and Dad said, I don't care how you enter into the digital world of photography, but you cannot miss this boat. Get a consumer camera or a professional one, but get it now. So the first digital camera was marketed in 1990. And so he had already been learning and experimenting for 9 years. So remember that the first cameras had that 4-second delay. I don't know if you remember that or were a part of that. You'd press a button, the shutter, to take the photo, and it would actually take 4 seconds before the photo was taken. And of course, everyone moved and you'd lose the moment. And constantly we were telling everyone, hold it, hold it, hold it, don't move. I don't know if you remember those days. Well, actually that 4-second delay on the consumer cameras was a blessing, and it gave the professionals an advantage for a while because everyone missed their shots. So I told my father, yes, I was waiting for the camera to get a little bit better, to get it ready, that it would last me for 5 years before investing $6,000. And that week, actually, the Nikon D1 came out. And within 10 days of his visits, I got a call from MasterCard. They were having a major launch of a new digital credit card at the Palace Hotel in San Francisco. They called up, as we frequently had photographed events at the Palace, and they told us of the event, and they said, "You do shoot digital, don't you?" Well, without missing a beat, I said yes. And so this is where having strong relationships with local suppliers in your industry really comes in handy. I was living at San Francisco at the time, and I called up one of the large, actually I was living in Napa, but I had done business with Calumet in San Francisco, and I called them up and I said I had a job in 10 days and I needed a digital D1 right away. They said that there was a 6-month waiting list. I said I needed it in 3 days so I could learn to use it in 6 days, and here was my $6,000. So being a loyal and good customer at the time, we were actually buying $1,000 worth of film every week from them, as Lowell and I were photographing 4 to 6 weddings and corporate jobs a week. They put us on the front of the list. They got us our digital camera within 3 days. So we also had, at that moment, had to upgrade our computers and burn our first CDs, and DVDs hadn't even been invented yet. So the digital cards were actually 125K, not even 1 gig. So things have really grown so rapidly. We photographed the speakers in a dimly lit ballroom with a projected screen behind them and shot transparency, which is slide film, side by side with the digital. And at that time, the ISO or the ASA, the light sensitivity of the camera, only went to 1600, and that was pushing the technology. Today, actually, the ASA and the ISO are up to 100,000. It's amazing. So you can shoot in the dark, see more than the eye can see, and even without grain. So from being masters at film and with the Hasselblad, we entered into the world of learning through urgency. So while you could get a great digital image, when you went to print it, the ink actually would fade after 3 months. They hadn't gotten that technology together. The images were not stable. So it took for a few years then for the first Fuji Frontier printer. And then finally the Kodak came out with an integrated printer that could read the digital image and create the print on the photographic paper. And today, actually, when you go to that 1-hour photo machine or Walmart or CVS, you're not actually getting a photograph on photo paper. You're getting a layered sublimation image with a much smaller range of colors. It's a dry process, not a wet lab. Also, the freshness of the chemicals makes an enormous difference in quality. There is a vast difference in a quality consumer process and in the professional laboratory. So the lab that I use is actually called AccuColor, AccuColor Imaging in Northridge, and they also make albums. And I love sharing like who is the best in technology. Also, Bay Photo is another really good lab. You really want to know. Yes. So they want to see more of the works. So when I teach photography, let's go to the art of seeing. So I realized here in Napa, people come to Napa because of the wine and the food, but also the beauty, and that so many people wanted to learn to shoot like a pro. So let's go and share that as well again. Okay. So we teach a class called The Art of Seeing. So holding that frame, when I first teach, I actually share with a paper frame and let people look at the through that frame, because so often we look at the subject, but we forget about those outer images. So I asked my father about whether or not we could write a book about two generations of, from the two generations of photographers. And he said, actually, Janna, the book would only have one word in it. So can you imagine? So in the chat, if you'd like, if there was one word that sort of would sum up what makes a difference between an amateur photographer and a professional photographer. So let's go to the next picture. Background, he said, because people can get a face, they can get a picture, but it's not integrated with the background. So I asked him whether or not that we could use two more words in the book. So we'll go to the next. Framing device. So the idea, and to the next picture. So whether it's photographing a family or working with architecture, like everywhere you go, if you create a visual interest with framing devices, it really makes your work even more powerful. It adds emphasis to your subject by framing the subject, creating a visual envelope. So the next slide. So here's another sense of framing. Again, being really conscious of parallel lines. Here's Morimoto in his kitchen. Next picture. Again, framing. So here is a light-haired woman. So putting her with the dark background behind it. And again, those parallel planes are so incredibly important. Next picture. So I want to talk to you about some of the tools of photography. And so this one is about depth of field. So there are the speed of the film or the camera, the ISO, there's the shutter speed, how quickly the shutter is going, and then there's the f-stop. And when you work in a combination of the three of these things together is where you do create visual impact. And so when you ask, what story am I conveying? It's very clear with this picture. So shooting at a very low depth of field, 5.6 or 2.8 or 1.8, to just really get the subject clear and allowing everything else to go out of focus. It adds emphasis to the story. Next picture. So when we talk about depth of field, sometimes we really need it incredibly in focus. So, on a tripod, and the weirdest thing in photography when we talk about f-stop is the 1.0 is something that's wide open, and then the f22 or the f45 is a teeny tiny opening, and that's where you get everything in focus from the jugs in the foreground all the way back. So this is, we did a photo exhibition for the Napa Museum about wine caves and went around the valley and shot the different caves. Next picture. So the idea of being conscious about the story that you're telling and working with the tools of photography of, do you want it with a large, what this is, the depth of field, or a narrow depth of field, and also working with ambient light. So this is not like flash fill. This is like being conscious of what the room light is. And that's when it starts being more romantic and more taking you, transporting you right into the room. The next photo. So again, the narrow depth of field. This is a maple tree in our backyard, and just really loving. So if there was one thing that I could really want to emphasize is begin to notice the direction of light and where it's coming from and how to work with it. And the idea of having things be darker behind the subjects gives emphasis to the what's in the foreground, whether it's a face, a person, or a flower. Next picture. So this is actually shot from a balloon. And so when you are in a moving car or in a balloon, you need to be shooting at a faster speed because the earth is turning, the balloon is moving, you're moving in a car. So, or when people go on safaris, sometimes they'll come and learn from us to make sure that when they're in that car moving, as they're seeing the animals, that the pictures that they get actually will be in focus. So, yeah, we call this Big Blue. I love this photograph of the Napa Valley. We live in such a beautiful place. Next photo. Again, the parallel lines and working with natural light and using the doorways as a framing device to tell the story. Next photo. Again, here is Karen, who wrote the Wine Bible. And so it's both about her and with the wine and with the feeling of the valley, but allowing that to drop out of focus to give emphasis. And then also notice that rim lighting on her cheek where the light is coming from behind. Yes, so the next photo. So there was a question about, are photographers involved in raising awareness about action and climate change? So that's about truth telling as well. So we show this, I was driving down the valley and I happened to notice people were off to the side looking at something, and I stopped and holy moly, it was a double rainbow. So yes, the power of photography is used both for the beauty that we have around us. Well, if you take a look at whether it was the incident with George Floyd, and that it totally changed the world because somebody was there with their camera phone video and being able to be responsible and telling that picture of what's happening up in tar sands and people singing songs and taking pictures, and or even the war photography and how making that real. So everybody can choose the emphasis on the story that they want to tell and how socially involved that they want to be. And we do ask the question, what is the story that you're telling with each of the pictures? So I'll tell you another really funny story. We'll hold on to this just for a minute. I was photographing my uncle's fancy party in Beverly Hills, and we handed my 7-year-old a digital camera. And when we were reviewing his images, what did we see? Actually, it was a collection of ladies' shoes because he was 7 years old, and that was the viewpoint where he was. And it was so fascinating of what he was looking at. So, the idea of changing viewpoints when you're photographing pets or kids, like get down on the floor, like really change the perspective up, and you will change the nature of your photography. And we definitely challenge you to change it up. Let's see, next picture. So I happen to love paths, like in the idea of taking on a theme or a series of pictures. So for me, I'm sort of an otherworldly girl, and I like the idea of transporting us and thinking about our futures and things like that too. And so using the path as a metaphor for that. Next picture. Or roads that we're traveling on, so pictures tell a story, they tell event or something that you're happening, or sometimes they allude to poetry like a path or archetypal images. I love photographing doorways and thresholds also. So here actually is dear Rene de Rosa at his place. And so for 40 years, I've been photographing people in doorways. And so it was such a gift while I was at his property to ask him to pose and to sort of then give him back the gift of him and his estate and make art of him, who was an amazing collector as well. Next picture. So again, the importance of parallel lines. This was Ken Rakow, the editor of Vox Art magazine that Lowell and I were involved in. And just going around and looking at how do we tell a story? How do you walk into somebody's personal space and give a sense of who they are? In fact, that's what we do for Napa Valley Life magazine when we're doing, whether it's the cover or editorial images. It's an amazing challenge, and one that we love tremendously, to be able to go into somebody's space and tell the story of who they are. Next picture. So here, this is inside my home, and I wanted to ask if sometimes you ever like see an amazing light and then you have this thought about taking a picture. Next picture. But then it doesn't always turn out the way that you want it to be. So what I want to share, so many pictures, people are taking pictures with their smartphones, and their pictures turn out where the subject is dark. So what I want to tell you is put that light behind you, switch places. Next picture. Same place, we just switched places. So this is Natalie, and she's so beautiful, and it's just that sense of that reflected door or window light, like I was telling you about when I was a little girl, and that Dad would always talk about being cautious of the direction of light and have the light work with you. So think about that when you are taking pictures. So the strongest light should be behind you, and let the subject be in this gorgeous reflective light. Next picture. If somebody was to ask me what my most favorite thing in the world to photograph is, it's actually women in their 9th month. And again, it's that window light coming in. When we talk about creation and the act of creation, and it's just something that I get very, very excited about. I loved being pregnant, and just the whole creative act, and it's fleeting. Talk about fleeting moments. You're only pregnant for a very short period of time, and what an amazing gift to actually share with your child what it was like when they were inside you, and all those things. But just, and the power of black and white, it's just incredible. Next picture. Again, more directional light. Just there was a couch next to a window, and we were photographing a family, and here are these kids, and just letting them be themselves. It's so important that when you photograph kids, that you meet them at their time, and be funny and silly and make it lighthearted, and then you get such better results. And also, what I'm sharing with you is the power of putting multiple images together. So part of what I'm sharing is how to be able to present the pictures that you took, whether it's alternative processes, which we'll get into in a minute, through fusion imaging, like we saw before, or multiple pictures together. Next picture. Again, window light, the power of the portraiture. Hal Milton, that we love dearly. So this was photographing him for a book that he had written. And next picture. So work with light, and sometimes it means getting up before the sun rises. So that's actually my father with Jim Hench, and they were lovers of the Napa River here. So Lowell took this amazing picture, and is an amazing supporter of our Napa River. And so, like what I showed you before, when you don't want a silhouette, sometimes you do, but it's most powerful when he got them when it was lit behind them. So you have to look for those kind of contrasts as well. So next picture. Another picture at dawn at Lake Hennessy that we love so much. It's like, we're so lucky for the amazing nature that we have. And thank you so much, Lowell, for sharing these amazing images with us as well. So just being a scout, look at that light at the top of the tree on the upper left. Just the sun is just raking over the mountain, just arriving onto the lake. Next picture. Okay, photographing nature and moving things. When you're photographing birds, you have to be at 1,000th of a second or more. So again, blending together your ISO, your shutter speed, like super quick, and the f-stop super open, and whatever it takes to do this beautiful blend of combination to get to that 1,000th of a second, if not faster. Next picture. So again, I mentioned that I have a whole series of people in doorways, and I was up in Ithaca actually, and working with 16 women, and I took portraits of each one in the doorway, same doorway, 16 different women, and we came up with all these different results. But 2 of them actually decided to climb the door. I don't know if you ever did that as a kid, but it was so much fun, and it really surprised me. But then let's talk about the gift it is of being here in the 2021 and being able to work with filters. So I put a filter on top, but then I erased all the filter to have the natural skin tone coming through. It was actually a color photograph with digital. So with digital, you can have it be in black and white. You can work with filters. You can add saturation. You can, take out the filter effect. So, is it art? I think so. And is there a lot of room for creativity? And your imagination is your only limitation. Next picture. So here's a picture of a tasting. Again, I shot it all in color, and then I desaturated out everything in the room but the color of the wine at the tasting. So just playing around with it and working with contrast. Next picture. Aha. So our house was hit very hard by the earthquake, actually. So that's me standing, holding the blown out turret window in front of the wall where all the plaster came off, revealing the plaster and lathe. But so the idea of taking a photo, putting it inside of a frame, and now having it be a 3-dimensional sculptural object instead of just a photo on the wall. So I happen to be a sculptor by training, as well as a photographer, as well as carrying many different hats and things like that. But I love changing it up, working with the natural copper background and the patina, and then the single cup. So frames within frames, and our mind is like a frame, our consciousness is a frame. So like, what are we thinking? And so working with these various metaphors. So next picture. So along with paths, then changing it up. So I happen to love portals, and I'm somewhat of an otherworldly girl. And I really see the multiple worlds, like we think of the world as solid, but actually it's made up of particles. And I love that sort of scientific mind. And so the idea of having a path and entering an otherworldliness. So I have all these wild ideas in my head, and like, how do I convey that out and share it? Because I love to share. And so photography is an amazing way to be able to do that. Next. Just one more path. So what I wanted to do is to have you think about seeing things differently, about really noticing the direction of light, about using the tools of depth of field, about being able to be creative and outside of the box. So I think that might be the last picture. Yeah. And so I know that we only have a few minutes left, but I want to make sure that we have opportunity for any questions that anybody might have.
Wow, Janna, thank you so much. I'm so inspired, and I truly am. I'm moved and excited about just the natural curiosity I've had playing with my iPhone when I'm on nature walks and I'm capturing my granddaughter or just people I don't even know. And I'm like, I see a moment. And you're right. There's this, it really is art. And just thank you so much. I'm wondering, do we have any questions? We can just you could raise your hand or your virtual hand, or you could put a question in the message box, which is down in the center. I think you already addressed the one question about photography involved in raising awareness and action about climate change. And I think that you addressed that. Anybody have any questions? Let me ask you a question, Janna, while we wait. Let's see here. Let's see. Oh, can you talk a little about your classes? Yeah, please, because I know I'm inspired. I'm like, gosh, I don't know if I have time, but I want to take one class now.
So I also have a free ebook at makeartofmyday.com that you can download, and it just talks about the creative process, makeartofmyday.com. So the classes are, they could be private with one person, it could be a group. We do that with corporate groups or team building as well. So basically it is customized in terms of what it is, what level that you're at, and what it is that you would like to learn, because we have this whole wide variety. So basically it's 3 hours with us. So we have two different class styles. One is with 3 hours, and then the other one is a 6-hour experience where we make an art book. It's almost like a day in the life of as well. So people are welcome to go to also artclarity.com, and I can put my phone number in the chat, and people can.
Will you also put the link to maybe the classes?
Sure.
Or to your website, to artclarity.com,
Sure.
or we can have maybe Kelly can do that or something. Let me ask another question I have is, what camera do you recommend for somebody who really wants to get into, photography in this way?
Okay, so what's really important, I think, is to have something that has interchangeable lenses, because as you grow in your photography, you're going to want to be able to have a variety of different choices. I also like ones that are the variable. So basically all of our work we do with two lenses. One is like a 28 to 70 and the other one is like a 80 to 200. So that they really are like, you can't use the 70 to 200 and photograph like family in a room. It's like all too close, but it's great for the individual portraits or for getting the long distance and things. So there are so many cameras that are available, whether it's Nikon or Canon or Sony, which is the new digital mirrorless and things. The mirrorless is more complicated to use. So even at Costco, they sell wonderful cameras, that you can use, or you can even get a used camera to get started and things. So you might get more mileage out of that. I love B&H, and they rate what level of use it is and things like that. But I was always very frustrated by this little point and shoot cameras. I do use the iPhone a lot, not professionally, but everywhere, I go, and to be able to share that. So the funny story, a couple of funny stories, that so many people would show me their family pictures of with the iPhone, but they were always out of focus because they didn't know that you touch the screen actually to change the focus, and that if you touch the screen and hold it there, a little sun shows up in there, and that you can actually change the exposure of it as well, and all the new features in the film, like the features in taking pictures and the different modes and the editing that you can do. It's absolutely awesome, but don't expect to get good Safari pictures, or don't expect, to get, the same depth that you can with a professional camera. But these days, even the prosumer cameras, so spending about $800 or $1,200 or something like that, you can get a whole outfit versus having to spend the $6,000 dollars for the professional one, because things change so quickly. You don't want to invest so much that you can't get the next level of all the new inventions of what they've just come up with. Yes, and even the iPhones do have a whole series of lenses, not only built in, but there's like little packs that you can add on additional telephoto and wide and things like that. It is an awesome time to be a photographer. So, but really to see things differently. That's why we call our class The Art of Seeing. So yes, we'll go over and help you to learn your camera. And also, two really important things. So YouTube is a great way to learn a tremendous amount about your specific camera, or going online to be able to look up Prague photographers, Paris photographers, New York photographers. I always tell my students that because the internet is very visual. When it first came out, it wasn't visual at all. It just was text. But now you can learn so much without having to go anywhere to see different perspectives and how people are seeing things differently.